Well, hi, my name is Sylvia Conafwa, and I am joined today by Michelle and Stefan Jones. And I just think your story is like pretty spectacular because they give us perspective on both being parents of a stem cell donor as well as a stem cell recipient. And I'm just really excited to just delve into this. So join me in welcoming Michelle and Stefan. How are you guys doing?
Fantastic. Great. Thank you
Doing
so
great. Thank you
much.
so much for having us.
Good, that's good. Okay, you mentioned you had four kids, and that I'm not a mom, but that just sounds like a lot. How's the relationship dynamic between all four of them?
I have to say, like, so there is four of them. They're age ranged 5 to 12, and they're about roughly 2 years apart. So um I would say that it's really good. I mean, they get along great. They play together, they work together, they have, some similar interests. And I would say that even like with the pandemic and them having to be home and really having each other as company, they've become even closer. And I would say that they're more than just siblings. They really are friends, which is really a blessing to see.
That's great. No, that's great. Well,
Mhm.
let's narrow it into one kid now. Let's talk about Avery. When did you
Sure. Yeah, let's do
first
that.
hear about Avery's diagnosis? Like, how was that like? When did you first hear? Just everything.
hmm let's start from the beginning, I think, with Avery. So Avery, to kind of put it in perspective, we had three kids before we found out that we were pregnant with our fourth, who is Avery. Um, all healthy pregnancies, all healthy babies, no major issues. Avery actually was our biggest baby. And came into the world rather easily compared to my other deliveries. Honestly, it was really strange for us when 4 months in, he so he was born in November, and it was around the March time frame that he started feeling a little bit unwell. His fever would spike. We would give him medication, it would go down, and it would go right back up as soon as the medication wore off. His platelet levels were low, his white blood cells were not as they should be, like the numbers were horrible. So that's essentially where things kind of started. As soon as we got down to sick kids, one of the first things that we were told by one of the residents in the hematology department was that Avery was indeed very sick. They didn't know what it was. It could be anything up to and including cancer, and that they would have to run a number of tests until they found out. And so he was hooked up to all kinds of machines at that point. They had to give him blood transfusions right away, to keep him alive. And that's essentially where it started out.
Wow, that's a lot. And like,
hmm
can you just give us like a sneak peek into like how you were feeling then? Like, what were the emotions like?
I think I think most of it was just like someone just help him. Like it's funny because as a newborn he used to cry a lot, and I used to wonder because my other kids didn't. I mean, they the normal amount of crying for a baby, but he used to cry a lot and just seemed very not happy, right? um and I think at the point of going to the hospital and realizing that something was really wrong, I realized that he had been suffering and I didn't know it. So that was devastating.
I bet.
And then I think for anybody that hears the word cancer, that's frightening.
Yeah.
So definitely a lot of worry, I would say.
And at what point did you realize, or like, were you told that Avery would need a stem cell transplant?
So, after being admitted to sick kids that evening, that Michelle was referring to previously, he was in the hospital for a few weeks, and they were running a bunch of tests. And when we finally found out that it was indeed HLH, and that ultimately the only cure, quote unquote, for that would have been a stem cell or a bone marrow transplant. Um, it was stressful, of course, because the pool to pull from or to take from was very low. And it was actually, funny enough, it was actually on Michelle's birthday, that we ended up finding out that we were able to find a match. But leading up to that point, it was, of course, very stressful.
And I bet it was kind of like looking for a needle in a haystack, especially with the numbers, and I
Right.
can in like being Black Canadian of like Caribbean ancestry, like they
Yes.
make like less than 3%
Exactly.
on Canada's stem cell registry. So I can empathize with that. But on to the most memorable birthday so far. Michelle,
Mhm.
can you tell us about that morning and then everything leading up to the call? And let's talk about the call
Yeah.
after the call.
Right. So yeah, so hearing that he didn't have cancer, but that he had this rare kind of genetic disease that operated almost like cancer but wasn't. But because of it, he needed a stem cell transplant. We were told that just like Stefan had mentioned, that the number of Black people on the list is very slim. So we were told right away that if a suitable donor couldn't be found on the list, then you know we would probably have to do kind of like drives and kind of things to get our community involved to find a suitable donor. But before we even got to that point, we were told that we have to look within our family. And while Stefan and I probably wouldn't be a suitable match for our child just because we only have half of his genetic makeup, that one of his siblings could potentially be a match. So let me tell you, I mean, I've always been happy about having the number of kids that I do, but in that moment, definitely more happy that there was not just one, not just two, but three possible siblings that could be a match for Avery. And so what that looked like was all of us really, I was staying in the hospital, I think at the time with Avery, or maybe we were out at the time. But anyways, all of us had to go to the hospital to have blood drawn so that it could go to the genetic lab to see which one of us was a match. And so all of us went, we had to explain to our kids who were 3, 5, and 7 at the time, so quite young, and had to explain to them, we have to take your blood, or the doctor has to take your blood, or the nurse has to take your blood to find out if you can help Avery so that he can live. So explaining all of that to these children, our other son was like, I don't want to give my blood. I don't want to get the needle in my arm. I don't want to do that, but he was 5, or almost 5.
Okay.
But anyways, he did sit down, blood was drawn, we all left. We knew that it was going to take a little while for it to go through, that genetic testing. So all that time, I mean, I was praying, we were hoping, we were wishing, and just really just anxious to hear what the results were.
Yeah.
And just starting to get, honestly, for me, I was starting to get myself prepared for the fact that, you know what, if we don't find a donor in the family, I'm going to go hard. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get everybody that I know that's Black and everybody that I don't know to get on this list. So I was already gearing up for that, right? But thankfully, my birthday did come June 7th, and we received a call from Dr. Nakvi at Sick Kids Hospital that they did find a perfect match within our family, and that it was our 2.5-year-old daughter, Gabrielle, who was a perfect 10 out of 10 match. The only way that it could be more than perfect was if she was also male, so like a male giving to a male. But the fact that she was a 10 out of 10 match was an amazing birthday gift. Couldn't have been happier that day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's like having 2 gifts in one day. It's like it's your birthday, and then it's like Avery's birthday. So it's
exactly. Yeah.
So like how did you tell Gabrielle, like how did you tell her you had to do this? Like it's you now.
Right.
How did you say it to her? How did she take it? What was the process like for her?
Recall us having a conversation with Gabrielle at the time when we found out. But at some point, I do remember her knowing, because she was very happy that she was going to be the one to save her brother. But I don't recall us sitting down to say, hey, Gabrielle, you have to go to the hospital and this is what they're going to do. Because I think we were just in that moment at the time. But then also after that, we began thinking, oh my gosh, we have one child in the hospital that requires this bone marrow transplant. And then our other child, who happens to be the youngest out of the three, is then going to have to go in for this procedure that we don't really know about. We don't know what discomfort or pain she might be in. So there was happiness, but then there was also a little bit of what's going to happen with Gabrielle, you know? So it was a happy moment, but we were kind of anxious, maybe a little bit apprehensive about it, just because we didn't know how it was going to go.
And I feel like for everyone listening, like we should marinate on the fact that she was 2.5 years old at that point. So like,
yeah,
that's a lot to ask of like anybody. Like I feel
yeah,
like even people in like their late 20s, 30s sometimes are hesitant to even give.
Oh yeah.
And like the day off the transplant, like how was it for her, and how was it for Avery knowing Gabrielle was gonna be his donor, and like what was the whole dynamic at that point? Like obviously everyone's happy, but again, what was it like?
To be honest, Gabrielle was happy. She was smiling. She was bubbly. She was ready. There was no,
Like a soldier
like
going into
literally
war.
like a soldier going into war. That was exactly it. And I don't know, just to see her when she finally got changed into her hospital gown and ready to go in. And I remember so many people crying. Kind of, it's almost like, sending, like you said, like sending off your soldier, and you're almost waving, and there's so many tears. And I just remember walking down the hallway, and the hallway wasn't that long, but it just seemed like the longest hallway ever, because I'm walking with her, we're holding hands and we're going down. And she just, as soon as we got into the procedure room, she just said, like, I'm Gabrielle and I'm here to save my brother, like making an announcement to the crowd. And there are doctors, nurses, different people in there, and they all just kind of stopped what they're doing, and they were just looking, and they looked at me, and I started to cry. And she just literally walked up, jumped up on the table, and let's do this, let's go. So it was it was really, really amazing.
Yeah.
Well, funny question here.
Okay.
Does Gabrielle get unlimited ice cream every Sunday?
She would like to be. She would like to be. And let me tell you, while she is a very kind and sweet child, but she knows what she did. She is very aware. Avery has an illness that is not completely gone, and it's come up on whether or not she might have to give again. She's older now. Gabrielle will be 8 in September. And if you ask her now, she will tell you right away that she would give again, and she would do the bone marrow transplant again in a minute. Avery's 5, and we're still trying to tell him about his own story for him to understand it. He was 7 months at the time of his transplant, so we're still trying to tell him. But I think at some point it's going to click for him. Hey, I wouldn't be here if Gabrielle didn't save my life. Whether or not she holds that over his head is still to be determined. If she uses that for her benefit, like, you owe me one, so you better, whatever. We're not sure, but for now, it's okay. Yeah.
That is simply amazing. And just to wrap things up, like, do you have like anything to say to people like who are like hesitant, to sign up to become potential stem cell donors? What would you say to someone who's like listening and it's like, I'm not really sure about this right now?
Mm-hmm.
Life is a test, and it's difficult. But to know that you could literally save somebody's life is just, to me, like an amazing gift to give to anybody. And there's so many people who are so worried. And though I understand people are scared of needles and different things like that, all it is a swab in your mouth. You take a Q-tip, you get your mouth swabbed, that's it. And there's nothing more to it than that. So we actually ended up doing a drive at our local church. And while when we were explaining to people kind of what was going to happen and how the day would go and whatnot, so many people, even after the drive and during and whatnot, were like, wow, that's so easy. Like it was nothing. It literally was nothing. All we had to do, show up, and the volunteers that were there were able to just literally just take a swab on the inside of the cheek, and that was it. So it's so, to know that there are so many people suffering and dying and struggling and in need of help, and all we have to do is swab the inside of our mouth and we could potentially save a life. I mean, that in and of itself is amazing. So just do it. Just do it. Just sacrifice the little bit of time that it takes, and just do it.
Yeah.
Every time I hold him and I pick him up and I play with him, there's some days I know he's looking at me, looking at him, and he doesn't know why I'm looking at him the way that I'm looking at him, but it's a miracle. It's amazing. And there's lots of people that would love to experience what we're experiencing in him. So swab, that's all it is. It's so simple. It's so easy. Just do it.
I just want to speak to those that are minorities, not just those that are of Black descent, but also just all minorities, because you know, across the board, those that are from South Asian descent and Asian descent, and just all minorities, and even those that are biracial, especially, like, though we need everybody not to just go and get the kit to swab, but also tell somebody about it as well. It really is that simple as taking a Q-tip and swabbing on the inside, and then you're just added to a list that many people rely on to save lives, to cure illnesses, to treat things that cannot be treated in any other way. And while I think a lot of people are afraid of being on the list because they might potentially be a donor, the actual donation part is not as invasive as maybe some people think. Like, there's more than one way of retrieving the cells that are required to save somebody's life, but also even the way that happened with Gabrielle, which is that they had to go through her hip bones. Gabrielle was young, yes. She was skipping out of the hospital that very same day. And when I was on the unit with Avery, there was someone that was in their 20s who had donated to save her brother's life. She was in her 20s. And yes, I do remember her walking on the floor while she was with her brother in the hospital. And I could see that she was in discomfort a little bit. And soon after that, she was back to herself. So imagine having a little bit of time where you might be uncomfortable to save somebody's life. It is so worth it. So we do encourage everybody to register and become or be added to the donor list. But I'm speaking specifically to those of ethnic diverse backgrounds. Please, 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 do it for yourself, but also encourage somebody to do the same.
And lastly, sorry, just one more point. Just even though we're talking about stem cell donation and stuff like that, which is in swabbing, even to be honest, even the importance of blood transfusions, like donating blood, if you're comfortable doing it, and even if you're not comfortable doing it, if you're able to kind of push yourself to do it, it's so crucial. Like, while Avery was in the hospital, I don't know how many blood transfusions he had. Like, and I'm not talking 5 or 6. I mean, multiple a day blood transfusions. And when we saw the packets coming in, and just realizing that each packet was somebody sacrificing their time and just literally rolling up their sleeve and spending a few moments giving blood, that was able to tide him over to the point where then he could actually be saved, was amazing as well. There are so many people that are reliant on blood, and there can never be enough. I mean, there's a shelf life to everything, and it's being used. So to those of you who are also able to donate blood and are comfortable doing so, definitely do it as often as you can, because you too are saving lives.
I totally agree. Well, this was so inspiring. Great. You've heard it. everyone's always in need of blood donors, stem cell donors. So the power to save a life is literally in your hands. You just need to just go in there and do something. Well, thank you so much, Stefan and Michelle, for
You're
joining us
welcome.
today. It was really great.